simply can't afford to pay for them.
Bill on our Republican line from Easton, Pennsylvania. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for taking my call. You just mentioned that the idea should be to make the poor people richer and not the rich people poorer.
Right.
But if you have a company that has a certain amount of profit and the CEO keeps increasing his salary and keeps holding the lower worker down, which is what has been going on over the last 25 or 30 years or whatever, that doesn't add up.
Yeah, well, as I said before, I don't have a problem paying a CEO as much as A-Rod makes or as much money as, LeBron James makes. And, people say, oh, my gosh, we paid $150 million to a CEO who runs a $50 billion company. That is what A-Rod makes or some of these actors in Hollywood. What I object to is when the companies don't make profits and then they get these golden parachutes or they get these bonuses. And I think that's what makes people angry. Look, I did an interview in the Wall Street Journal about 2 months ago with Fred Smith of Federal Express, one of the great entrepreneurs and wealth creators of modern times. Fred Smith gets a big salary. He's one of the richest people in the United States. But here's a guy who's created over 100,000 jobs for Americans, has made many people rich, and provided a service that has made the U.S. economy very efficient. I don't think anyone has a problem with paying a Bill Gates or a Fred Smith or a Jack Welch of General Electric, who built that great company, paying them a lot of money. These are people who have control of massive amount. Their decisions have an impact on the livelihoods of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Kansas City, Missouri, on our line for Independence.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for C-SPAN.
Thanks for calling.
Yes, I was just wondering why that nobody will attack Ronald Reagan, because everybody seemed to want to go down the same path that he went down to cut taxes. But the truth of the matter is, what happened when the economy boomed was all because of dope and credit cards. Will you answer me there? Thank you.
Well, look, the deficits back then were large, and we had a big military expansion, as I talked about. We also cut tax rates. I think that borrowing for those two things was certainly appropriate. We built a world-class economy. We pulled out of that horrible mini depression we had in the 1970s. At that time, many people thought that America was in just a permanent decline because of the wreckage of the policies under Nixon, Ford, and Carter. And Reagan really helped turn this U.S. economy around and created a great period of prosperity where the U.S. economy more than doubled in the last 20 years or so. So I think we should get back to those kinds of policies. I think that the average working man and woman benefits most when the U.S. economy is growing. And as I said before, we want a system where we are the country where people want to invest in. You look in what happened after Ronald Reagan cut taxes in the early 1980s. The rest of the world actually followed suit. If you look at what happened to tax rates around the world, they came down so that other countries could retain their competitiveness vis-a-vis the United States.
Brad in Canton, Ohio, your question or comment for Stephen Moore.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Moore, you're obviously a very intelligent man. The question I have for you, you spoke about the 19% flat tax or possibly a federal sales tax as alternatives. But I'm sure you are aware that, say, for example, a couple making $30,000 and a couple making $1 million a year in income.
Yep.
When you consider payroll,
right,
state, local, gasoline, sales taxes, their actual tax rates are virtually identical as a percentage of their total income. Although maybe the $30,000 couple doesn't pay much in federal income tax.
Right.
Now, so if you go to a 19% flat tax, what in essence you're doing is raising the tax rate on the couple making $30,000 into the 50s and lowering the tax on the couple making $1 million into the 20s. Or if you go to a federal sales tax, of course, the 30,000 couple, a huge percentage of their income goes to purchases.
It's a very good point. First of all, let me just correct you on something. There have been a lot of studies that have looked at, the statistics I was noting about, the top 1% paying 40%, this gentleman is right. That's just the income tax. But there have been studies that look at if you take all taxes, sales taxes, gasoline taxes, and the system is still highly progressive. The rich pay under that system, when you look at all taxes, about 30% of the taxes, maybe not 40%. But I'm glad this gentleman called because I wanted to clarify something about the flat tax. When I talked about, the fact of about 19% flat tax with no deductions, there is actually one important deduction, which is a per family allowance. And you could make that whatever you want to, but under most of these flat tax plans, like the plan that Steve Forbes proposed, a family with an income of, say, $30,000 would pay no income tax at all. So you'd have a deduction for a family of 3 or 4 of about $30,000. So that low-income family you're talking about, sir, would pay 0 income tax under this system, and then you'd start paying that 19% flat tax above that level, and that's precisely to protect the poor. And by the way, that's also true of the fair tax, the national sales tax. A family with an income under $30,000 would be rebated all of the sales tax they would pay under that system.
Our next call comes from Sally in California. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm
Venice?
I'm a school teacher in Benicia, California.
Okay.
I'm a Republican, and I live next door to Vallejo. I used to work in Vallejo.
Okay.
And I'm very nervous out here. 2 things have happened from my point of view. One, I'm watching Vallejo sink to nothingness. First, their school district went under. Now, because, as you noted, the services are so expensive for the firemen and the police officers that I have no idea how they're going to survive anything, because their houses sell for $40,000, $50,000. The other thing is that as a school teacher, I teach development delayed. My friend and my son are able to afford nice apartments in Concord, California. So there is an upside to people who are unable to afford prior to this. My concern is that the way we're going, especially in the school systems, we're taxing ourselves to death and everybody's leaving the state. I see no hope between the federal government and the state as to how we're going to solve this problem. Do you see any?
It's a really good question, and by the way, it's interesting. We just were talking about Vallejo, and thank you for calling and confirming what I was saying about the financial problems of Vallejo. And there are a lot of cities, Rob, in California that are facing those kinds of problems. So I'm really grateful this woman called. Unfortunately, I think California is a mess. And what happened this year, as you know, ma'am, is that instead of cutting taxes and California is so uncompetitive when it comes to taxes. I know people who are rich, who lived in California, the greatest place on earth to live, and they've moved to states like Tennessee and Nevada, and you can see these migration patterns. And they tell me they can buy a new house in a state like Nevada or Tennessee with just the taxes they saved by moving those states out of California. So I think California is incredibly uncompetitive right now. The politicians are ruining one of the greatest places on earth, and I think California should move towards the Texas Texas kind of arrangement. Get rid of your income tax, tax people on their purchases. If you do that, you'll see housing values rise. You'll see California reclaim its glory. I mean, we need the California economy to grow to make the national economy grow. After all, this would be the 6th biggest country in the world, as California would be if it were a separate country. So I'm very worried about that state. They're doing all the wrong things. I used to work a little bit with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think his heart is in the right place, but he's made a lot of the wrong decisions on taxes. And there's going to be a big referendum on the ballot in May in California about raising tax rates, and I hope the people of California have the good sense to vote against that.
Without